Boker Tov, everybody, welcome, and thank you for joining us here this morning as we study our Kosher Crash Course. We are racing through the laws of Kosher, and today we're learning about the laws of dishes. The laws of dishes and the Mikveh. You got to dip your dishes in the Mikveh. That's what we learned last week, and we're expanding this idea that we're going to hopefully finish the laws of kosher vessels today, of dishes that even though you bought a dish and it's kosher, because it's never been used before, if you bought it from a non-Jew and now it's in the possession of a Jew, then it has to be dipped in a mikveh first. And we said that this is based on the verse in the end of the book of Midbar, with the story of Moses and the conquest of the nation of Midian, when the Jewish people collected all the bounty of the nation. We learned that there are three different conditions that are required. It has to go from the possession of a non-Jew to the possession of a Jew. Number two, it's got to be dishes that are associated with the right? The same ones that are subject, the ones that come in contact with food. And also it applies primarily to metal dishes, but also to glass dishes as well. Okay? So that is what the concept is talking about over here. And we're going to expand this idea right now as we go through it. Okay? So how do you dip this mikveh? What does the process entail? Good morning, Andy. And Rob is with us. Who else is with us here? YouTube is working, I hope. I don't know if it's working. I don't see anybody on it, but hopefully it's working. No, it doesn't look like it's working, actually. I don't know. Maybe YouTube's working, maybe not. Good morning, Terry. Okay, we're going to carry on. At least Facebook seems to be working. All right. So before you dip the dish in the mikveh, now there's a mikveh for dishes. You know, you'll often find when you go to a mikveh that there's a little place on the side called the dishes mikveh, right? A dishes mikveh, what that means, it's like a little pool of water not made for a person to dip in, but for little dishes, right? Oftentimes you'll see them in the kosher stores in New York and other places. When you buy them, we mentioned last week, they'll let you dip the mikveh in the store as a service. So before you dip the dish in the mikveh, you got to clean it well from any dirt and glue, any rust, or any stickers. That's very important. When you buy a dish, they often have those annoying stickers on them, which have this very strong adhesive glue, and you got to take it off, because if you dip it with the glue on top, then it doesn't clean it. It's like going to mikveh with a Band-Aid on you, and if you have the Band-Aid on you, then the water doesn't hit that spot, which is covered by the Band-Aid, and therefore it's not really a kosher, it's not a proper dipping. The waters have to go all over every single part of the dish. Now, if there is any sort of separation on the dish, such a separation that people don't worry about it. In other words, such a separation that you wouldn't normally remove. In other words, you'd be happy to use this dish with that kind of separation on it, with that kind of adhesion on it. So normally you wouldn't find people serving dishes with the stickers on them still. It's not really acceptable. But if there is some other form of adhesion, which is the way in which you're serving using the dish, then it's not a problem. I can't imagine what exactly that might look like. But if there is something stuck to it, which is stuck to it in a way that it doesn't bother you, then it's not considered a separation. A dish is made out of different kind of material stuck together, and you use each part separately. For example, you have a like what do they call those things? Like a bowl and a cover on top. So you use them separately. You take the cover off, you put the cover on, right? What you have to do, you have to dip them in the mikveh separately. Separately the top and separately the bowl, right? But a dish which is made up of different parts that are always used together. For example, a pot which has handles. You never separate the handles from the pot. You use them together with the pot. You don't have a pitcher with a handle, or a cup with a handle. You never take off the handle, right? So what you do is you don't have to separate them from each other in order to dip it. You dip it all in one shot. Now, you make a blessing. There's a special bracha that you make on the dipping of the dishes. You hold the dish in your right hand and you make a blessing. And you can do this at the ocean too, Keith. You can dip your dishes at the ocean too. It's a kosher mikveh, right? So what do? You hold the dish in your right hand. You make a blessing. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu v'mitzvot v'tzivanu al tvilas kelim. Blessed are you, Lord God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with His commandments and commanded us to fulfill the mitzvah of dipping dishes.
Next time you come over, we'll take some dishes down. do this, and then we'll come down.
We'll make like a pulley system down from your balcony. You live on the 18th floor or something, right? We'll knock them down. We'll throw the dishes down, catch them. Yeah. But obviously, I mean, that's what you're supposed to do for sure. Now, when you dip a bunch of dishes together, if it's only one dish, you make a blessing. Al tevilas kli. Dip on the commandment of dipping one vessel. But if it's multiple vessels, then you'll say it in the plural form, al tevilas kelim. You got to be careful not to make any separation between the ending of the blessing and the beginning of the dipping of the dishes, all the way through to the end of the dipping of the dishes. In other words, you made the blessing, right? You can't start having a chat, answer the phone, take a walk. You made the blessing, you go straight into the dipping, and you finish all of the dishes without talking anything that's not related to the task that you're doing. So in other words, if you have to turn around and say, would you please pass me that other box so I can carry on, right? That's not a separation. But if you say, by the way, who won the Super Bowl today, that would be considered a separation, right? It would be considered a distraction. What?
What do you do if there is a separation?
Then you've actually separated between the blessing and the...
Repeat the blessing.
Theoretically, you would need to repeat the blessing. I'll give you a quick example. When you're wearing a talus, you make a blessing on the talus in the morning, right? What happens if your talus falls off? If it falls off entirely, you have to put it back on again with a blessing. But if you caught the talus, even by the string, as it fell off of you and it didn't fall off of you entirely, then there wasn't a complete separation. So you can put it back on without a blessing.
So there isn't like al mitzvah to be allowed. That
No. If some of the dishes are not obligated with a blessing, are not obligated to be dipped in the mikveh, like we discussed last week. The metal is obligated by divine, by biblical command, right? We said last week was gold and silver and copper and metal and tin and aluminum and tin, and any kind of metal, right? And so too, we said also the vessels are made out of glass, like Duralex and Pyrex, and glass and Corel, and all those dishes are obligated in a biblical command. But porcelain is not obligated by divine command, by biblical command. Is not obligated by biblical command, and therefore they don't have the same degree of obligation, right? That which is made out of clay or ceramic or stone or wood or nylon or plastic is not actually obligated at all to be dipped in the mikveh. We just do so. We're extra careful, and we do it without a bracha. Yeah, exactly. We do it without a blessing at all. So now, what happens if you made a blessing and now you have got the different kinds of dishes that you have to dip in the mikveh? Some of which are obligated in the blessing, and some of which aren't. You should have in mind all the dishes, those that need and those that don't need.
So ceramic is not like a rabbinic thing that you do make a bracha on, right? Plastic, you definitely don't make a bracha.
That's right. Ceramic, you don't make a blessing on. No. So, but if you do it with metal dishes and you make the blessing on the metal dishes, then you include that too. One blessing for everything. Okay. Now, if you did make a separation, you interrupted. You interrupted between the dipping of the vessels, between one dish and another dish, with something which doesn't need to have. So it was something which is not related. You spoke about the Super Bowl, you took a walk, you answered the phone, right? Living in the distracted generation that we live, then what happens? And you have to go back and make another blessing. Every dish which has a doubt if it was dipped in the mikveh, you go to your kitchen, right? And you say, I don't know, this might have been dipped, it might not have been dipped, I don't know. Right? It got mixed up. Or if it's not clear if it was owned by a Gentile, that you bought it from a Gentile or not. Or if there's a doubt, if it needs a blessing because it's made of some complicated composite of material, right? Then what the general rule is that when you have a doubt with regards to blessings, you always go lenient and you dip it without a blessing. Anytime you have a doubt whether to make a blessing or not, or whether you say Hashem's name or not, you don't say it in vain, and you rather will say it. You dip it without a blessing. Good morning, Rob Berger and Terry Zweig. Marinov, and I see Daniel Geiker's with us as well. Daniel has dedicated this entire month's Torah study in loving gratitude to Hashem for the blessings that Hashem has bestowed upon him, especially with regard to his father, to Michael ben Miriam, who should continue to be blessed with health and strength and happiness for many, many, many long years. Okay, today, the dipping of the mikveh the dipping of the blessing that you make in the mikveh. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Yeah, go ahead.
So if I have a ceramic plate, all I have to do is put it in the mikveh and it's fine.
Yep.
I don't have to do it.
No blessing. Ceramic, no blessing. But if you have a metal pot, then you would. Yeah.
I have a lot of ceramic things,
So the ceramic you do without a blessing. But if you have one metal pot, anything metal, a fork, you do the blessing on the fork and everything gets included. Remember, on a spiritual level, when you make a blessing, on a spiritual level, what happens is that you're drawing divinity down to this earth. And if you remember, we learned in Tanya that the whole purpose of our existence upon this earth is to illuminate the darkness of this earth, to take the spiritual dysfunction of this earth and to illuminate it with the light of Hashem. And when you make the blessing, you verbalize the drawing down of Hashem's light down to this physical earth.
So you take the fork, do the blessing on the fork,
and then you keep on going with all your ceramics.
It adds to that.
It flows the blessing all the way through, the energy, right? Now, if you go to a mikveh, let's say you go to a regular mikveh where people are dipping, like let's say a men's mikveh. Women go to a mikveh privately, but men typically will go in groups. Men go like in the morning, they go together. So let's say people are getting undressed in the mikveh and they go in and dip in the mikveh in the morning. And you're coming in with half your kitchen, right? So can you make a blessing inside of the mikveh while everybody's walking around disrobed? You're not allowed to make a blessing in front of somebody who's disrobed. And therefore, somebody who wants to make a blessing on the dishes shouldn't do so. I mean, it's not a good idea in general to dip glass dishes inside of a mikveh that's being used by people. Because if you break something, and that's possible, it's not going to be pretty. It's going to look like a... it's gonna get ugly pretty fast. Well, you can get around that part. This plugged in my computer, folks. Hold on, bear with me a moment. We need juice. We need power. Hold on. Okay, good. I think we're power. Okay, good. Back to business. All right. So therefore, you can't even make the blessing, by the way, in the room where people get dressed, and then move on to the room where the people go into the mikveh. Rather, you can make the blessing outside of the mikveh, and then hurry up and go straight into dip in the mikveh without getting interrupted with any hellos or anything, right? Obviously, you can go into a mikveh if nobody's there and make the blessing, right? Good. Who is allowed to dip the dishes in the mikveh? Can anybody do it? Can a Gentile do it? Any man or woman can do the dipping in the mikveh for the vessels. Even a child or a non-Jew can do it. Just got to be careful that the Jew or the Gentile, you got to be careful that you need a Jew, man or woman, who are grown up, an adult Jewish male or female, that can testify that it was dipped in the mikveh. Because otherwise, how do you know? The Gentile says, yeah, I dipped it. Is that credible? I mean, to him, maybe he doesn't care about it. So what's the difference, right? He's not sensitized. The what?
The dipper doesn't have kavanah.
Exactly. The dipper doesn't need to have kavanah. It's about the dippee. It's about the dippee. The vessel needs to be dipped. It's not the intention of the dipper. What?
It's all right for the Gentile to do the prayer.
No, he doesn't do the prayer. The Gentile wouldn't do the prayer, right? It would take a Jew. The Jew would have to make the prayer. In the first instance, however, you shouldn't ask a Gentile to do it because of what you just said, because he can't make the blessing. But after the Jew made the blessing, right? Like if you're that kind of Jew that doesn't want to get your hands dirty, then you make the blessing and you have someone else do the work, right? Good. Well, he can help you. When you do it through a child, then the child is able to make the blessing because he's a Jew as well, right? What about the waters of the mikveh? Which kind of waters can you use for the mikveh? It's got to be in a place that is kosher enough for a woman to go to mikveh. Now, a man's mikveh doesn't need to be as kosher as a woman's mikveh. A woman cannot dip in a mikveh to be for a kosher mikveh, for a marital mikveh. But a man is allowed to dip in a swimming pool, right? Preferably the filter should be off. A woman cannot, because it's got to be a much more kosher mikveh for a woman. And that kind of mikveh is what you have to use for dishes, which means you need to have a mikveh which is like a biblical mikveh, not just a pool, any kind of pool of water. What that means is like this. It's got to be 40 sa'ah. 40 sa'ah is a measurement. It's a biblical measurement. It's like 40, it's a liquid measurement. 40 cubic sa'ah is what you use of rainwater. That's how you make a kosher mikveh. So to explain how that works, when you go to a mikveh, there's a hot water reservoir, which is great. But beneath the hot water reservoir is a regular reservoir of collected rainwater. And it's collected in a very meticulous manner to make sure that the water is not being put into a vessel. It flows, from the gutters, and there's no vessel that captures it anyway, in order to be considered rainwater. It's got to be a reservoir of rainwater. The minute it's captured in a vessel, in a cup or something, it's no longer rainwater. It's now dishwater, like contained in a vessel. So when a woman goes to a mikveh, it's got to be in either like an ocean or a river, or it's got to be in a mikveh which has a reservoir of 40 cubic sa'ah of rainwater. It's not very big. It doesn't be very big. 40 cubic sa'ah is not very big. But that's the kind of mikveh that a woman that it needs to be used for a mikveh for dishes, right? So in other words, you can't dip your dishes in a swimming pool. Is basically what I'm saying, right? So included in the kind of kosher mikveh would be a regular mikveh, right? Or a spring, or a river, or an ocean, or even a well. A well, you could dip it in the well, or some other pit of natural rainwater.
But the swimming pool gets rainwater too.
No, it's got to be the swimming pool. Is works like this. If you filled your swimming pool with rainwater in the first instance, then you're right. Potentially, it would be okay.
So just adding rainwater is not.
Adding rainwater to existing drawn water, every drop that lands in becomes nullified to the drawn status, right? And also, if you have rainwater and it's got a filter in it, it's not so simple. You'll notice, like in a regular mikveh, the filter is in the top mikveh. So what happens is you first put in the rainwater, the 40 sa'ah of rainwater, then every drop that comes in gets nullified to the rainwater as it comes in, and the filter works in the top one, and the drawn, right? Gotcha. Okay, there's a lot of laws relating to mikveh. So springs and rivers that you dip in them, you can use them for dishes for mikveh, even if they're not gathered in one place, but they're flowing. If you really need to, you're allowed to dip dishes which are of rabbinical obligation, like glass. Remember, the only one that's biblical obligation is metal dishes, right? But if you really need to, then that which is of rabbinical obligation, glass and others, you can dip it in collected snow, which has a volume of 40 sa'ah. Now it's very interesting because I remember when I was speaking to a lady from Tasmania, I think, during the pandemic, the COVID pandemic. She was building a mikveh in Tasmania, and people couldn't travel, so people couldn't go to the mikveh. Normally they fly to Australia to go to the mikveh, but when the airlines are shut down, nobody could fly to Australia, so they had to make a mikveh in Tasmania. So the way they did it, they got a whole rabbinical dispensation to do it in a way with using ice blocks. Ice blocks is not drawn water. Apparently it's rainwater, which is collected and not drawn. It's a very interesting concept how they were able to do that. When you need to, you're able to use ice or snow. Now, how do you do the actual dipping? What you do is you put the dish entirely under the waters. And you have to make sure that the waters are touching every part of the dish, both inside and outside. So no stickers, no touching. Even your fingers, if your fingers are clutching, you got to leave go for a moment, right? And therefore, when you dip it in the mikveh, you also got to make sure that, the content, if you put it in and the water doesn't go on the inside, it's a problem, right? So you got to do it in a way sideways that it fills in the inside of the dish, because in such a way it will enter into every corner of any nook and cranny. And when you put it face down, also be careful. If you put it face down, you'll create an air bubble. Also, you got to make sure to loosen your fingers to make sure that it goes even where your fingers are holding. So you got to catch and release. This is the original catch and release, right? Release and catch. Okay, so when you want to dip a number of dishes in the mikveh, you could actually take a little, like a bucket, or have like a little metal basket they'll often have in there. And you could put all the forks and knives in there. You could dip them in and shake them around in there. So you have to put each individual fork in there. You could just shake them in so the water goes around, right? According to the letter of the law, it's enough to dip it once, but there are those who dip each one 3 times. This is Jewish OCD, right? You take each dish, you do it 3 times, some people do it 18 times, some people do it 100. No, I'm joking. 1 time is all you need. 1 in, out, in, out. But some people do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? This is Jewish OCD, right? It's like washing your hands, exactly. What about electrical appliances? And we said metal dishes that come in contact with food, like a toaster, seemingly would need to be dipped in a mikveh, right? Imagine you have some sort of a fancy electric frying pan or What about a fancy Nespresso coffee machine? Right? Normally a kettle. What if it's a mikveh? What if it's a fancy, $500 coffee machine? I don't think it was made to be dipped in a mikveh. So what do you do?
Those parts that can be taken.
Yeah, so you could deconstruct it and dip it in one piece at a time. Maybe I had good luck putting it back together, right? So if they're made out of electronics or something like that, then you dip them as much as possible, and then you try to let them dry and see what happens. If they don't work again, you give them back.
Don't plug it in.
Don't plug it in while it's wet. Now, if there's no possibility to dip them in such a way, what you do is you bring it to a Jewish electrician, a Jewish appliance guy,
Yeah.
and he takes it apart as much as possible, and he puts it back together again in such a way that now it's being built by a Jew. So remember, if it was made by a Gentile, then it goes into the possession of a Jew. Now it needs to be dipped in the mikveh. But if it's deconstructed and reconstructed by a Jew, it's okay, right? Then it's fine. It's no longer obligated in the laws of the mikveh, right? Another option is that a simpler way is to gift it to a Gentile. Give it a gift to your housekeeper or something, and then ask that person to give it to you as a gift forever, which means it's not something that you purchased.
So you gift it to them and they give it back to you.
Yeah, exactly.
What are they doing in Israel? Is that what they do in Israel?
Well, during the pandemic, that's what we did. Because in the pandemic, in the early days of the pandemic, we weren't able to go to the mikvahs. So they said you can just do it that way by gifting it to the Gentile.
How about any electric item, obviously?
I'm sorry, did I say gifted back to you? No, that wouldn't help. That wouldn't help. I'm sorry. You gift it to the Gentile and then you borrow it from them. I'm sorry. Then it belongs to them. Because now that it belongs to them, you're good, right? There's nothing. Didn't go from possession of a Jew to a Gentile. It belongs to the Gentile. You're just using it. You're just borrowing their possession. That's what we did in the pandemic. Okay. Sorry, did you ask a question, Keith? Any questions going on? Let me see if YouTube is working. It looks like YouTube is. Oh, it is. Boker Tov, there's a cookie. Boker Tov. Ronald Collins is also with us. Odapam. And Ed Hockman is actually also with us. Fantastic, Ed. Good to see you. Ed, we miss you in show in the morning. Come join us. All right, good. Now, we're almost done over here, guys. All right. What about using a dish that wasn't dipped in the mikveh? So you go to your friend's house and you find out that they're serving you on a dish which wasn't dipped in the mikveh. This, by the way, is part of the problem. When people say, Rabbi, I'm kosher, you can come into my house. You can come into my house, but with all due respect, you don't know all the laws of kosher. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's like going to a person that says, I know how to do surgeries. Don't worry about it. Trust me. You know what I mean? I wouldn't trust someone who says, trust me. I trust the college certificate, maybe, right? But when somebody says that they keep kosher and you should take their word for it, it's not so simple because there are so many nuances that they are most likely not aware of unless they truly live this life and you know that they're learning about it. I think Rob is saying gift. I must have said gift then. See, correcting what I said. It looks like you retracted. Okay, whatever. Go ahead, Keith. What were you saying?
So, hypothetically, I'm going to have you come over to my house.
Yes.
I have a set of dishes that I will have that are kosher.
Right. When I came to your house this week, you gave me a plastic cup.
I get that, but I'm saying, but let's say.
By the way, am I allowed to use a plastic cup that wasn't dipped in the mikveh? Did you dip the plastic cup that you gave me in the mikveh? Ah, so how do you use it?
You don't have to do it with plastic.
Well, that's a good answer.
Yeah.
Plastic doesn't need it in the first place, right?
My question is, though, so if I had a set of dishes that were done kosher, mikveh,
Yeah.
and I kept them in a separate closet.
Correct.
And then you came over.
Perfect. We can use it. Yeah, absolutely. I have people that do that. They keep kosher dishes separately for me in their house. I mean, whatever. Some people do that. Yeah, no problem. Good. Okay, fine. Now, but there's other issues. You can't really have a proper meal over there because they can't cook. Their oven's not kosher. You know what I'm saying? But theoretically, if you get catered or something, if you bring some food out there, we could use the dishes. But the question is, how did you wash them? Dishwasher? Dishwasher means it's mixed up all together. Whatever was on the other plate gets into this plate if it's in the same dishwasher.
But it was just those dishes in the dishwasher.
Because it's the same dishwasher. The tray for flavor goes into the walls of the dishwasher and out of the dishwasher into the walls, into the new vessel. What? How did you wash it? Was the water hot? If the water was hot, then the flavor goes into the sink and back into the sink and into the dishes. It spreads. You got to really have a kosher kitchen. It's not so simple. Go with disposable. It's easier. Okay, fine. So what about dishes that were not dipped in a mikveh? If dishes that are touch food and are obligated in the dipping of the mikveh, according to the letter of the law, you're not allowed to use them before dipping in them in the mikveh, even a temporary use, not even once. If you did use them before they've dipped in the mikveh, then the food is still kosher. The food is still kosher. However, you should take it out of the dish before you eat it. So you should still be careful. Don't just forget about this one. What about a dish in a restaurant or in a hotel? You're going to be careful from eating and drinking in a restaurant or a hospitality place or a hotel, which are using dishes that haven't been dipped in the mikveh. If you have no choice, and you are going to use them, then you have who to rely on. But it's better to use dishes that obviously don't need to be dipped in the mikveh in the very first place, like ceramics or porcelains or plastics, right? So it gets kind of complicated, and that's why you also need a kosher certification, right? That's why you need a kosher certification, because if you have a kosher certification, they cover all these things. Kosher certification doesn't just mean that, it comes from a cow. Was the cow slaughtered? Was the cow sick? Right? Was the meat processed in a plant that's not? What else is in this salad? Right? And what's on the dish? You know what I mean? Where did the dish come from? Did the dish go to the mikveh? Right? Terry's asking, what if you wash before putting in a dishwasher and use dishwasher as sanitizer? Terry, there is a discussion about using dishwasher as sanitizer. Or in other words, ruining the flavor of the previous cycle. So in other words, if you run it empty with just soap, you run it empty for like a cycle, right? Then potentially it might be okay to do that, but it's certainly not the best way to go. In other words, if you're on your way towards kosher, that's a good way to go. And certainly stepping stones, but it's definitely not a full-time way of keeping kosher, which is to toggle between back and forth. I say to people, get a second oven. No, get meat and milk. Because otherwise, there is a way to flip meat to milk and back and forth. It's not recommended. There's a way to do it. You know what I mean? But imagine you'll forget one day and you mix everything up. You trafe up the whole kitchen. So I have two separate kitchens. In my house, I actually have a mechitza down in the middle of my kitchen. I have two separate kitchens in my house. Right?
Everybody has a big house.
Yeah, exactly. Not everybody can do that. Exactly. You'll see it one day. Right, exactly. Well, what about last thing over here is dishes that are being dipped on Shabbos. You cannot dip the dishes on Shabbos. Why? Because you're making them ready for use. It's one of the prohibitions of Shabbos is to make something functional, right? It's called the prohibition. One of the 39 labors of Shabbos is Mikveh patish, which is the final hammer blow. Final hammer blow. And if this is making it fully functional and usable, then it's the final hammer blow. Right, and then you're not allowed to do it on Shabbos. But if you do it on Shabbos, then you're allowed to use it on Shabbos, and there's no fine that would give the person to have to wait. Normally, if something was done illegally on Shabbos, then you have to not use it until after Shabbos, the amount of time it would have taken you to do it after Shabbos. Right? But we don't find the person in this particular situation. The rabbis didn't find him. Also, if a person needs to use a dish in Shabbos and he has no choice, then what should he do? Give the dish as a gift to the Gentile. Say to your Gentile neighbor, this is a gift to you. Right? And may I borrow it forever, right? And then you don't have to dip it in mikveh at all, right? And also, I remember when my father once, we were in a resort in the middle of Zimbabwe. Went to a resort and there was a problem with carrying on Shabbos. In the resort, there's no fence, there's no eruv, it's complicated, but whatever. My father went over to the Afrikaans owners or managers of the resort and he said, would you mind if I bought the resort just for the Sabbath, just for the next 24 hours? I'll buy it for $10, for 10 rand. And now, because it's owned by one person, it makes it easier to carry. They were so mystified as to what was going on. They couldn't understand, because, there are loopholes in the law. But when you share them with the Gentiles, like imagine you went to your Gentile neighbor and said, can I give you this pot and then you'll let me use it forever? I mean, how would they even react? You'd have to have a good explanation to accompany it, right? Okay. So what you do is over here, if you give it to the Gentiles, a gift, after Shabbos, when it comes back to your possession, then you dip it in a mikveh. I just want to go through a few kitchen items to wrap up. A few practical kitchen items, right? A blender, right? It's electrical, right? Needs a blessing with its dipping. Why? Because it's made of metal, right? A bottle of glass, a glass bottle would need. What's interesting is, what about the wine bottles? When you buy a bottle of wine, was the bottle of wine dipped in the mikveh? I don't believe they dip these bottles of wine. What about Coca-Cola? You think they dip the bottle of Coca-Cola in the mikveh? They don't. First of all, it's plastic. It doesn't need. But when you buy a bottle of wine, does it need to be dipped in the mikveh?
Or the cans.
or the cans, metal, right? I believe that we get around that by the one-time use, that it's not made for being used ever again. So it's not made to be used as a vessel. It's only storage. It's an interesting roundabout, Okay, but it's not so simple. A plastic bottle, some people will dip, and some, but obviously certainly without a blessing. A a metal kiddush cup or silver kiddush cup certainly needs a dipping with a mikveh. A grill would need to be dipped in a mikveh with a blessing. Yeah, like a barbecue grill.
So-
The part that touches the food.
Yeah, the touch, yeah.
Yeah. A kettle would need a mikveh blessing because there's metal in there, right? A toaster. The toaster.
Just the pots.
When you dip it in the mikveh, make sure it's not plugged in while you're dipping it in.
Well, this is
right?
Just the pots that touch the food.
The toaster.
The
Can you
tray.
take them out?
That's the heating element.
Oh, if you have the toaster that goes through,
It's a
interesting.
toaster oven, but the toaster is the one.
Yeah, the toaster, the old fashioned, it goes pops out. The toaster that pops out. That one. Okay.
That you can't-
What about in Israel? In Israel, you buy milk in a bag. You buy milk in a bag in Israel, and then you put it into like a little plastic pitcher. So the milk in the bag comes in a bag, but it sits in a plastic pitcher in the bag. The bag sits in the pitcher, so you wouldn't need to dip the plastic pitcher. Obviously, it's plastic anyways, right? Yeah, I'm gonna try to race through this little list over here. If you have a pitcher made of glass, it would need a blessing. And remember, the only ones that we do with a blessing is glass and is metal and glass, right? Those are the ones that we do with a blessing, right? Glass cups will need a blessing. Golden vessels, glass vessels all need a blessing. One-time disposable vessels, disposable dishes do not need any dipping. Disposable dishes need no dipping in the mikveh. Plastic dishes, some people dip and some people don't dip, certainly without a blessing. Cutlery like cups and forks and all that certainly would need a dipping in the mikveh if it's made of metal. Those graters that you grate cheese or vegetables, that would need a blessing if it's made of metal. Obviously, it's made of metal. And a tray where you put food on the tray, like a board or a cutting board or something, right? If it's made of glass, then it needs a blessing. Okay. The pestle and mortar, where you crush something, right? The grinder would need it. A potato masher would need a blessing. Frying pan would need a blessing. You get a mixer needs a blessing, right? Obviously, you could do the part that comes in contact with the food. A special knife that's like a cutting situation. Like an electric knife would need it. The parts that touch the food. Even a salt shaker needs to be dipped in the mikveh. A peeler, peeling the food, needs a blessing. When you wash your hands for bread, you wash 6 times, right? One in each hand, or three. That would not need, because it doesn't touch your food. It washes your hands. It doesn't touch your food. Pots, knives, all need to be dipped with the blessing. A can opener needs a blessing? No, doesn't. Why does it touch your food? It opens the can.
Touches the oil, touches the.
You pour out the oil. It doesn't really touch your food.
Okay.
It's can open, it doesn't need it. The thing that you hit the schnitzels with?
Tenderizer.
It's like a hammer, right?
Yeah.
Is it called a tenderizer? If it's made out of wood, then no. But if it's made out of metal, then yeah. A plastic pitcher. Some do dip in the mikveh, some don't. A glass pitcher, we said you would need with a blessing. And a drinking glass vessel certainly needs a blessing and a dipping in the mikveh. And that concludes the laws of the dipping of the vessels in the mikveh. We went through it. We did it. And thank you, everybody, for joining me here today to do it. Today's Thursday. Corey gives a class at 11:30 on Hebrew language through the prayers and the Psalms. That's 11:30 for men and women. GeorgeGardens.com/Zoom. Tonight we have a beautiful class on Mashiach, the last class of the course. This can happen. It's on Zoom, and it's all about what the world will look like when Mashiach comes. And thank you for joining me here this morning, friends. Wishing you all have a great day. Today's Torah study being dedicated lovingly by Dan Geiker in loving gratitude to Hashem for the blessings that Hashem has bestowed upon him and his family, especially to his father, Michael ben Miriam, for complete health and a speedy and continuous health from all of his medical concerns. God bless you all. Thank you for joining me. Shalom and have a great day.